and welcome to another appointment in this cycle of international video conferences on the Zoom platform, all dedicated to tramways and other means of transport. Before we begin, I have just to ask the people who is not yet registered in this cycle, please, they have to write in the chat their name, surname, and email address and city. So the next time they will receive automatically invitations for the next incoming video conferences. Thank you. Tonight's presentation is coming from Canada and will be given by Ted Wickson from Toronto. This presentation will be done in English. At the end of the evening, there will be a space for any questions in English or in Italian, and you can also use the chat in English in every moment during the presentation. I remind you that a complete program of the forthcoming presentations is available on our internet site on the English section. Thank you. I have to tell you that next presentation in 15 days will come from Belgium, Brussels, and will be titled 150 Years of Trams in Brussels on Tuesday, 18th of April. Thank you. Now I repeat all in Italian. Buonasera, benvenuti a tutti a questo nuovo appuntamento nel ciclo internazionale di videoconferenze sulla piattaforma Zoom dedicato ai tram e agli altri mezzi di trasporto. Come ho detto già agli amici stranieri, anche per gli italiani, se c'è qualcuno che è collegato questa sera e che non è ancora registrato, è pregato di scrivere usando la chat di Zoom il proprio nome, cognome, città e il proprio indirizzo email, così riceverà automaticamente notizie le prossime. La presentazione di questa sera arriva dal Canada e sarà tenuta da Ted Wickson, che ci parla dalla città di Toronto, una grande città tranviaria. La presentazione sarà fatta in inglese. Alla fine della serata ci sarà spazio per domande in inglese o in italiano, ma potete anche usare la chat quando volete in italiano durante anche la presentazione. Vi ricordo che il programma completo delle presentazioni prossime è disponibile sul nostro sito internet nella home page. Grazie e ora la parola va a Ted Wickson. Thank you. The floor goes now to Ted Wickson. Please, Ted, it's up to you.
Okay. Thank you, Roberto. Some of you may have seen the presentation last December 5, put on by myself and Michael Washlow. That was a short summary of TDC Centennial. What I'm presenting tonight is going further back to the first horse cars up until the present time. I will not talk about other features of TDC over the history. It's bus fleets, bus routes, its ferry service, and venture into amusement parks. A few notes on lexicon used. Most of my measurements are given in metric, that is feet and inches, but there will be some in metric, kilometers, for example. I'll go back to the very beginnings in 1861. That was when the city of Toronto granted the Toronto Street Railway a 30-year franchise to operate horse cars. The fare was 5 cents and the motorman's starting wage was 15 cents an hour. The track gauge was 4 feet 10 7/8 inches, which was the English wagon track at the time. In the early days of horse cars, of course, it was a flat rail. but that became obsolete as merchants had larger carts, which had to run outside the flangeways. And to further complicate things and make it permanent gauge, the horse car system went to girder rail, flanged rail. When the franchise neared its end in 1890, the Street Railway Company owned 68 miles of track and a fleet of 260 cars, 99 horse-drawn omnibuses, 100 sleighs, 1,372 horses, and served 55,000 passengers daily. I'll show a few pictures. Just to refresh your memory of where we are, we're on Lake Ontario. You can see here, this is a map of the Great Lakes, part of Ontario and bordering states. Typical horse car, closed for winter operation. In the horse car days, the drivers, conductors were issued no uniforms. It was up to the crew. A two-horse open car on Yonge Street in the summer months. This is about anyway, it's about 1885. Toronto Railway Company was granted a franchise in September 1891 for 20 years under the condition it electrify the fleet within 2 years, which it did. This is typical of one of the original Toronto Railway Company closed cars with open front platforms, rear open platform. There was no heat in the cars. The crew were issued uniforms. At first, they had to pay for them. Should mention that in the Toronto Railway days, the rule book stated that the conductor, and this is, we're getting back to the Toronto Railway Company. It's early years, late 1890s, early 1900s. This is a view in a picnic park in Monroe Park. It's a double, let's see, it's an open car with a former horse car trailer. I should note that these open trailers and open cars would be banned on Toronto streets in 1915. This view, of course, is 1905. This is just before the TDC took over the Toronto Railway fleet. That's a view of an early 1890s single truck car showing the enclosed front platform. There are a few anecdotes about the Toronto Railway cars. They did not have onboard air compressors. They just had a storage tank. And if they leaked air, they could get it replenished either by a roving compressor car or a work car, or overnight at the car house. After 1894, all large double truck cars were built in the old shop building, which was formerly used by the Toronto Street Railway. After 1908, the larger double truck cars were built 6 inches off center so they could pass safely on track that still had the narrow devil strip. Toronto Railway track construction, reconstruction after 1903 was built to the wider devil strip of 5 feet 3 inches, which was the TTC standard and the Toronto Civic Railway standard. View downtown of open convertible cars. These cars could have sides enclosed for winter operation, cross-bench seating removed, and longitudinal seating installed. Typical scene, Young and Queen, 1914. This is a city photo. They were documenting a case about the Toronto Railway Company, which refused to extend service beyond the 1891 city limits as per their original franchise agreement. The city challenged that, but the courts upheld the Toronto Railway Company. This was the car building shops. All cars here were of wooden construction. There are multiple floors with an indoor elevator. Toronto Civic Railways was opened in 1911, 5 routes. Of course, it was built with to TTC gauge, wider double strip. All of these cars would be inherited by the TTC. They were quite new. Toronto Suburban Railway connected with the city system. It was a separate fare system. Portions of it could run on city gauge. Its longer interurban line was standard gauge. Wartime traffic, Queen and Spadina, 1916. The war was created hard times for the Toronto Railway Company. It lost 1/3 of its fleet in 3 separate fires, 1 in 1912 and 2 in 1916. The company could not replace the cars fast enough. This is typical crowding. The city was, of course, filled with servicemen awaiting assignment overseas in Europe, First War. Typical recruitment drive in Toronto. The Toronto Railway Company loaned a large double truck car to the 109th Regiment. There was a lot of patriotism in those days, large population with roots to Great Britain. The TRC lost 1/3 of its workforce who signed up for the war. As a result, they were not only short of trainmen workers and maintenance workers, also about 25% of the workforce did sign up. The company between 1914 and 1918 had to hire 4,100 new employees, mostly operating crews and maintenance people. Now we're getting into the TTC era. This is a map of the city. I can do this, showing the old city limits in gray. That was the area served by the Toronto Railway Company under its franchise. And these are the new areas annexed after 1891, which would soon be under TTC management. Central Harbor in Toronto, downtown area, in 1920. This is Union Station, the centerpiece. This whole area today has all been lake filled through dredging and port expansion. In 1923, showing the electric railway, urban railway and suburban routes running to Toronto. Before I get too far into the TTC, I should mention that it did inherit 830 streetcars from the Toronto Railway Company, some dating back to the 1890s, and some trailers formerly horse cars. The horse cars were refused, so only 351 of the larger double truck cars were kept for the long term. Pacific Railways had 70 cars, which were all put to use by the TTC. These are retired Toronto Railway cars stored at Eglinton Yard, 1922. There was a large forest fire in Northern Ontario in 1922. The town was in desperate need for temporary housing. As a result, the TTC shipped north almost a dozen former Toronto Railway cars as temporary housing. Motor car 306 and trailer 64 formed part of TTC's historical vehicle collection. It's now in the National Science Museum in Ottawa. Day one for the TTC, overhead crews finishing up the intersection at Church and Queen, Grand Union. Much of the track work involved mixing concrete on site, a concrete mixer. TTC had several flat motors which would transport the batch boxes of the concrete mix to site. Typical view of a flat motor with batch boxes and a mixer. Another view on Queen Street East. Often the track work took place while regular service maintained on temporary tracks at both curbs. It's a very intricate intersection at King, Queen, Roncesvalles, and Lakeshore Road. 5-way intersection. Most of the work was done under traffic. It was only closed for 9 hours. More track work on Bay Street, the financial district of Toronto. In the background, you can see the old City Hall. Hillcrest complex completed. This is the view in 1926. The site was acquired in 1922, 15 acres, former garden and racetrack. Head office, in use many years. One of the former Pacific Railways cars, Bernie at Bloor and Dundas in 1924. A larger Preston-built car, ex-Toronto Pacific Railways. This is around 1947, just before these cars were retired. Former Toronto Railway car, formerly a convertible car, in November 24. TTC retired a lot of the single truck cars very early. They were all gone by the mid-20s. At the Shoreline Museum in Connecticut, there is a pair of cars restored. Car 1706, Class F, showing its summer appearance as an open car. The trailer is a replica built to horse day plans around 1890. Opening ceremonies were a big deal for the TTC. Under contract, they ran streetcar service for the township of York and town of Weston. This is one typical opening ceremony. The Oakwood and Rogers car lines, 1925. And for the Weston car line. It's the view of an Oakwood car near St. Clair, Terminus Point. These cars were converted from two-man to one-man operation, whereas the bulk of the TTC fleet was always two-man. TTC acquired a large fleet of Peter Witt cars. This is typical of a small Witt car as delivered, with the window screens and earlier paint scheme. There were 575 Peter Witt streetcars, which was made up of 350 motors and 225 Witt trailers. It's a typical Witt train. TTC's general manager, Harvey modified the trailer by adding a door to speed passenger flow. So these were always known as the Harvey trailer. Small bit on St. Clair Avenue on a center reservation, which would be paved over. And today, of course, it's back on its own private reservation. It's noon hour traffic at Yonge and Queen in late August 1929, just a few weeks before the stock market crash. Bitterwit trains in the Queen Street Shopping District, 1928. Two major department stores faced each other. The T. Eden Company on the left and the Robert Simpson Company on the right. Trolley coaches were experimented with in the 1920s. There were 4 coaches, but this route on Mount Pleasant Road was replaced by streetcars. Another view of a large wit in front of Union Station. Interior, showing the motorman sealed off and the conductor at a center platform. It was pay leave in those days. TDC would soon get involved with running the radial lines or suburban lines west, east, and north of Toronto. These were formerly operated by the Toronto and York Radial Railways, which was soon part of the Mackenzie Empire. Mackenzie being the principal owner and manager of the Toronto Railway Company. They were disconnected. The city would not allow the interurban cars to run through city streets. There were larger cars, more railroad type, also built in the TRC's shops. City bought out the line in 1920, assigned it to Ontario Hydroelectric Railways, and then to the TDC in 1927, which rebranded the line as the Lake Simcoe line. Typical view in hydro days. A principal destination point was Bond Lake Park. When the TDC took over, they of course did run express cars through the streets, normally over in the evening hours. They had a terminal downtown near the old shop building of the TRC. That came to an end in March 1930. The township reeves and mayors pooled their resources to provide a contract to the TDC to operate a service north to Richmond Hill. Any losses or profits went to were shared with the municipalities and TDC. All losses were absorbed by the municipalities. There were 4 of them. Typical North Young cars. This is car 13, 1939. Car 416 at North Toronto Terminal. This car today is preserved at the Halton County Radio Railway Museum. A view near the end of service, September 48, 1 month before the service was abandoned. Some other views, exhibition loop in 1937. The CNE was very popular as a destination point for amusement. Still is today, but to a smaller degree. Same platform 40 years later in the PCC era. There was a major rebuilding program in the late 30s, mid to late 30s. Several upgrades, coal stoves were removed, new flooring, seating, and a simplified paint scheme. Interior of a upgraded WIT car. Another scene, 1933, of a mix of WIT trains and a TR opposite the Royal York on the left and the Union Station on the right. Another view, 1938, Young at Shooter. Oops. Altercation, WIT with a heavy truck. Minor damage to the WIT. The PCC era. This is car 4002, one of two cars on display at the Canadian National Exhibition in September 1938. 140 cars in the order. First week of service, October 4th, 1938. A view on St. Clair Avenue. And a view I took in 1964 of a pre-war PCC, or air car as they knew them, on the Queensway private right-of-way. World War II. TTC used 3 or 4 flat motors affixed with as moving billboards to promote victory bonds or support the troops. Wartime was a busy place between 1939 and 1946. Ridership doubled. A guides department was set up in 1942, staffed by women, part of the public relations department, who sold tickets at heavy loading points such as this at College and Bay Street. Women operators based out of Roncesvalles, 1945. Oops, I'll go back. TDC sold or leased almost 20 of the larger TRs to various cities, Ottawa, Fort William, Quebec City, to help them out in the war effort when they were short of cars. The TDC had a good supply of modern rolling stock, PCCs. More cars were delivered in the early years of the war, as American builders such as St. Louis Car could still ship. There were no restrictions, at least not till after America joined the war in December 41. Wartime scene at Yonge and Queen, 1941. Another wartime view, City on the Loop in 1940. The larger TRs were equipped to pull trailers, WIT trailers. This is a train on the King route at Broadview and Carlton. Gridlock, the end of the PM rush. Some cars going back to the car house. First air electric post-war PCC car delivered, 4301. Oh, I've got the number wrong. Class A6, a view taken by me later, 1973. Another view of an A6 car on Queen Street on July 1, 67, Canada Day. The next order of cars were from the A7 group, all electric PCCs equipped for MU service, which began in March 1955. Another view of an MU train, 1953. Another view of A7 class car running the Dundas exhibition service. This would be late afternoon, so the riders would be returning home. Another view of an A7 class PCC. In the later years, the couplers were taken away. Next group, A8 class. This was the last series of PCC purchased new by the TTC. TTC originally wanted 100, but the price had gone up through post-war inflation. So they accepted 50 PCCs, which were delivered in 51. A Niles car on the Western route, just months before the line was closed and these cars would be retired. This view has always intrigued me. It's a Western car at Kiel and St. Clair near the Scripps packing plant in the stockyards, a cow on the loose. Wartime view of a Western car in the Toronto Junction area, the Junction Terminal. And a lot of the TRs were scrapped in the late 40s and early 50s. Bits and pieces of TR 1826 at George Street Yard downtown. Many TRs were used as private dwellings or storage sheds. After the last TR ran in, I believe, March 51. This car, 1326, is now preserved at the Halton County Radio Railway Museum. With trailer trains, Young and Belsize, PM Rush. This was one of the photos used to promote the need for a subway under Yonge Street here. The rapid transit plan was developed near the end of the war, presented to Toronto voters, and passed by a 9-to-1 margin in 1946. I'll go back. There's a two-phase system. The heavy line was high platform conventional rapid transit or subway. The smaller dotted lines were to be a streetcar subway and then going underground through the downtown area. That portion was never built. It was always on the back burner. The federal government did not come through with funding for that. Early construction on Yonge Street. Initially, excavation was done by hand. There were a lot of unmarked utilities, abandoned old sewers, plus active sewers not shown on any engineering maps. A lot of it downtown was cut and cover. This is continued excavation underground. Work proceeded quickly. Some of the Yonge route was restored. This is a crane lowering rebar below to Queen Station platform, placing concrete. First two subway cars arrived in July '53 and were immediately prepped for display at the CNE, along with the mock station. Very popular exhibit. Cars were delivered to Davisville Car House from a CNR spur line. A view of a Gloucester train. They were built in England by the Gloucester Railway Carriage and Wagon Company, but they were 40% overweight, which required traction and power to be boosted. Interior of a Gloucester car. A view of Davisville Yard from the roof of the new head office. That was my workplace for many years. Promoting the subway. And the Gloucester train just outshopped in 1972 with a new red livery and yellow striping. Originally, this was gold leaf with black edging. and a slightly darker red. This red became the standard for the entire fleet, both BCC and buses. Gloucester train in the early 70s near Rosedale. The Bloor-Young transfer platform. Streetcars alighted or boarded here and went down an escalator or stairs to the subway platform on the Young line. Eglinton Station, the northern terminus originally. Metro Toronto was created through an act by the province, which greatly enlarged the area served by the TTC. Before amalgamation, TTC served 35 square miles, and in this view, it had jumped to 240 square miles and a new logo. Talk a little bit about the post-war PCCs. After 1951, all subsequent cars were boomer cars. Acquired from Cincinnati, Cleveland, Birmingham, Alabama, and Kansas City. 205 of these boomer cars. That brought the grand total of the PCC fleet to 755 cars acquired since 1938, the largest fleet in North America. Only one car was lost during the war when a car house wall fell on it. More views of boomer cars. A9 class. An A10 class from Cleveland. Oh, Cincinnati, sorry. Another view of an A10 class. These would all be retired mostly when the East-West subway opened. Another Cleveland car, Pullman built, class A11 in 1967. Louisville car as received by the TTC before modifications. This car shows the blinker doors. Louisville train as PM Tripper service on Bloor, entering Bedford Loop opposite Varsity Stadium. A12 and A11 PCCs, upper to right on Coxwell Avenue, in June 67. Whoops. Birmingham cars, also Pullman built in 1962. Another two Birmingham cars on Broadview Avenue. Not quite sure how these two prams got aboard. Often it required another passenger or even the operator to bring them on. many years before low floor cars would arrive. Last group of boomer cars were from Kansas City, class A14. A14 car at St. Clair Station Loop, circa 1968. Talked a little bit about the subway era. After the Gloucester cars, there was a series of cars delivered from Montreal Locomotive Works. They would become the standard, 75 feet in length, aluminum bodies. And Hawker Siddeley Canada supplied a number of series of subway cars. University Subway opened in 1963. At that time, there was a ceremony marking the end of Peter Witt's service, but a few of them soldiered on until April to handle crowds for the baseball opener of the day. Good luck on the Bloor Danforth Viaduct, showing the need for an east-west subway. Greenwood Yard shops and car house built in anticipation of the opening of the east-west subway, which did open in February '66. Many of the surplus species were scrapped, but 140 were shipped to Alexandria, Egypt. This is a view of one such shipment. 76 cars were placed aboard this vessel. Hard to believe, but below deck was a bed of corn, and the cars were simply rested on the corn and on deck wherever space was available. You can't see very well. A good friend of mine, Bill Lindley, was retrieving a streetcar gong for my vehicle. The Highway Traffic Act at the time said that all motor vehicles must have a horn or bell. So I complied. Of course, it was 30 volt. I had a friend retap it to yield 12 volts. The east-west subway was extended twice in either end. Hawker Siddeley wanted the TTC to consider a more radical design of car, but this was rejected in favor of a more traditional appearance. Area view I took of development along the Young Line, showing development around Davisville Station here and Eglinton Station to the north. For many years, I lived in one of the buildings here on Davisville Avenue. MU trains returned to the Queen route in the fall of 1967. Queen being a very heavy route at the time. You in the main shopping district, Pete's and Simpsons. On the Queensway, 74. Another view, same year. 1973, TTC ran a tour tram service with three Peter Witt cars, two of which were loaned from the Halton County Railway Museum. This is operator Charlie Price and a city supplied guide, H5 series. This cars with chopper equipment as standard and air conditioning. Here's a view of an H5 train. These cars had a lot of bugs in them. It took many months to get them all up to speed, operational. One of the perks of being a staff photographer was an opportunity to ride the subway grinding train, formerly PCC cars. This is friend Tom Parkinson and myself awaiting a trip up the North End subway just before it opened. And a view I took just north of Eglinton. Because of a shortage of cars, TTC launched a major rehab program for much of the PCC fleet, 173 cars. These were all cars that were usually 8, 6, 7, and 8. Adjusting accelerator. And note shop car, 1974. Like new. 2 rebuilt cars, Fielder. Another rebuilt car, recently at shop 4500. It would later become part of TTC's current historic fleet. Ridership was booming in the early 70s. So these car parts were placed on the surface fleet. Heavy traffic on Queen Street, PM Rush, 1974. Oops, sorry. Oh yes, the classic fare box. This was in use for many years, but it could not handle, its capacity was too small. And a new generation of fare box was installed. Views on the Spadina line, Eglinton West Station, a Gloucester train. After our photo of a train posed at Eglinton West Station, showing some of the wall artwork. St. Clair West Station underground loading platform. This would be 1978, 79. TTC board voted to retain streetcars indefinitely in 1972. So requests for proposals were sent out to various suppliers. This was an industrial design proposed by one consultant, of course, not really adopted. This was the final design with input from The builder, Urban Transportation Development Corporation, a provincial agency, Crown Corporation, and the TTC. The cars came with couplers, but cars were never used in MU service. Opening ceremonies, September 1979, sort of like the old days. First week of service, the cars were assigned to the Long Branch route, 507. View at Bathurst Station. UTC had cars loaned to the MBTA in Boston for demonstration and hopefully a possible sale, which didn't happen. View of a rebuilt PCC and CLRV on St. Clair. 1984 was a sort of year of celebration. Some of the Swiss cars got a wrap, mostly paint. It's really before vinyl wraps were the rage. And the City of Toronto's sesquicentennial was also celebrated. Spectre and CLRV at Neville Loop. CLRV at High Park Loop, New Year's Day, 2008. January 1999, so-called storm of the century, when the mayor called in the army to help clear streets. More recent view in 2018, the King Street pilot, which was a transit priority corridor in the downtown area. And this is nearing the end, a decorated streetcar. The CLRVs were finally retired at the end of 2019. This car did go to the Halton County Museum. These are views of the Arctic cars developed by UTDC. One car demonstrated in Toronto for a year or two. And this is the production models in service. They were introduced in January 88. One car was hired by Sneakers Footwear, Nike, as a mobile showroom. There are many proposals for rapid transit extensions. This was a TDC plan developed in 1985 and expected to be completed in 2011. Most of these dotted lines never came to be. Eglinton West, of course, was part of the current Crosstown LRT. Scarborough Rapid Transit Line was also built to honor the province's wish to demonstrate a new technology of what they call ICTS, linear induction motors, steerable trucks, automatic train operation. Much of it was elevated. 1983 Scarborough Center Station. I don't see any safety harness or anything here. Thermite welding, an old favorite. So 1983. And the finish line on the smaller cars. This line was standalone, so it was standard gauge. Sort of a mini subway. And new plans submitted by the mayor at the time in Toronto in 2007, showing more lines that are coming to be built today or on the planning stage. Last G train, this is the last one available for service. They were retired in October 1990. First two cars shown here are now at the Halton County Museum. The guide section, which I showed earlier, dating back to 1942, was closed in 1995 due to the economic downturn. The second PCC rebuilding went underway in 1966. 19 cars were outshopped. This is the first car 4600 at Hillcrest, and a view of it posing outside. This CLRV paint scheme was only applied to 2 cars, and it was soon reverted to the more traditional heritage paint scheme. Car 4601 was the one car rebuilt by the UTTC, who wished to get the order for this rebuilding program, Class A15, but were unsuccessful. Last day of service, December 8, 95. Small parade across Queen Street, decorated PCC. Police escorted. Car 4500 is now part of the TDC's historic fleet. And the other car is car 4549. Many PCCs found other uses as boomer cars acquired by other properties, such as Kenosha, Wisconsin. Some were bought by farmers for storage sheds. This particular car was a clothing boutique on Dundas Street. Former Birmingham car. TDC sold a number of former A11 cars back to Cleveland. I'm told it was more than the TDC paid for them back in the 1950s. View in Kenosha, car 4615. At Fort Edmonton Park, car 4612. It's the opening of the Spadina streetcar line. Lead car was Peter Witt 2766, followed by the 2 restored historic PCC cars. View of some of the very large fleet at the Halton County Museum. The current series of subway cars, so-called rocket cars. View of a southbound train at Rosedale. These were the first cars to feature an open gangway. see the low floor era began in 2014 with the introduction of Bombardier's Flexity car. Cars were slow in coming. A lot of cars had to go back to be re-welded. No views. This is, I believe, in 2020. Oops. View on the Queensway. 2021. Near Humber Loop. High Park Loop. Dundas Bus Station in 2021. Trolley coach era returned after the war. Cars were supplied by Canadian Car and Foundry, a bus division in Fort William, now Thunder Bay. These two would be rebuilt in a program. I believe there were 153 cars. Let me just check. $152 trolleys were rebuilt using older electrical equipment. And the new bodies were supplied by initially Western Flyer Coach Limited of Winnipeg. Hard to believe that the entire fleet could be rebuilt by TTC for $5 million. This is the prototype, 1920, and a production model just after being outshopped. Another view on Mount Pleasant Road. TTC was short of vehicles as the so-called flyer trolleys were unreliable in later years. TTC leased a number of coaches from Edmonton Transit. Just to add a 9 prior to their Edmonton fleet number. A few views of the work equipment. There were too many vehicles in both the subway and surface fleet over the years to show all, so I've picked maybe a dozen here. This is the locomotive and the tunnel washing train. Placing a test section of concrete ties on the east-west subway, east end. RT-13 crane, the locomotive and flat car. Maintenance car RT-13 in 1983. Snowplow used only on the Lake Simcoe line, that radial line north. And a view of a surface snow sweeper I took in February '62. Should mention it was a 3-man crew. We had a motor operator, room operator, and a wingman who controlled this. Many flat motors could be outfitted with plows and wing blades. This is a view just after the war. Track plow, built new, delivered in 1946. Surface grinding car, ex-Civic Railway. PCC grinding train on the surface. 2 former A11 Cleveland cars. Typical duties for a flat motor car. Picking up removed rail from unused at an intersection. One of 2 grain cars, C1 and C2, 1968, removing rail at Park Loop. Dump car, there were many of these. Sand car. Today, of course, trucks deliver sand to various locations. And a shunter. Wherever there was a trailer operation, cars stored, there was a shunter. Eglinton Crosstown. Somebody asked an earlier question. This is a test train in 2022 spring in the East End. Car supplied by Bombardier, or now Alstom. A view of what's underway. Crosstown, Finch West LRT, Shepherd East LRT planned, Scarborough RT to be removed, replaced by a relief line not shown here. West extension of the Crosstown, eventually to serve the airport. A schematic map showing the streetcar routes in red, mostly serving the downtown area. This the relief line known as the Ontario line. And another extension on the Line 1 Young subway up to Richmond Hill. Recent view of Toronto skyline. Quite a difference from that 1920 view. Residential condo buildings on the waterfront direct and the business district behind. Wrapped Flexity car promoting the TTC Centennial. And that, I'm sorry it took so long, is my presentation.